September. And actually, American High, who is the production company, they did kind of a test shoot to show Disney and Hulu that they could do this. And then they actually sent us their protocols, and this was even before, I guess the union had put out their protocols, their recommendations, right?
Yes.
But they had this whole set. They did a whole video too.
Oh.
And I mean, at that point, like I had no idea what the protocol should be because I had no idea what we were dealing with. I mean, it was really scary.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, it's still very scary out there. But I think they really kind of set the bar. So we basically, I think a lot of you are familiar with, it was divided into zones. Zone A being the people that are near the actors. We were tested 3 times a week. I remember I had to actually get a test before I got onto a plane to go to New York and make sure that was negative. And then I had to quarantine for 2 days in my hotel room. And I did that. And then we got tested again every 3 days. And we did the mask and the
face shields
and the social distance. But we shot a party. We shot a party in a house with like 30 extras.
Wow.
I mean, and to be honest with you, to their full credit, you know, this is one of the early, I know there was a lot of productions, but it was fairly early on in the pandemic. And this company, I mean, we had, I think, 5 positive cases over the course of 2 months, and they were not of any of our crew. They were like background actors who were coming in from someplace, or like a vendor who was coming in from Los Angeles. And you could not actually, we were doing a rapid test, and you could not go on set until you showed a negative test. Like they wouldn't even let you in the building. And we all stayed in hotels. We were like in our own little pod. I thought, just kudos to them at American High. And they're consistently making movies, and they're doing it so well.
Okay. Well, that's cool that you were able to get back out there. I mean, I always tell this to people, you know, working in, you know, for a manufacturer of products that are used in the film industry. You know, this last year, we've come to a realization that when we say frontline workers, or those people that are on the front lines, I mean, that's you and your teams. That's the people on the sets wearing the mask 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I mean, props to you. Let's give a hand to all the crew members that are our frontline workers of our industry that are out there wearing the masks, operating the cameras, and you know, getting the work done. We really appreciate what you've been doing. I think that's very exciting that you got to make this movie in particular, because I feel like, you know, during this time, having to be able to tell this kind of story and actually accomplish it and get it done, that was really cool. How did you go about choosing the look of it? Because if you're looking at some of the still images, and I'll pull a few more up in a minute, you're noticing a very distinct look, which, you know, you definitely created a lot to do that. So how did you come up with that? Like, how does that planning happen?
So what was interesting, because we were supposed to shoot this in March of 2020, actually this whole script happens in the Dakotas. And a lot of our look was based on snow. And so we had this kind of progression of color palette from the cools of the snow that go into, as they go into the adventure, the color comes in and then the sun comes out, basically, so to speak. And then all of a sudden, we get shut down. We come back to Syracuse, New York in September. There is no snow. There is the beautiful fall leaves. There's the whole other thing. So we had to actually envision kind of our look, because we still needed a trajectory. And one of the things that the director was always attracted to is kind of the 70s type of feeling. Like if you watch Superbad, it has that 70s vibe. We also used Battle of the Sexes, which she is actually an actress in. And that too, we used that as a reference. And we embraced kind of those yellows and the warms of kind of those kind of that 70s look. And then we used that, and then the fall leaves. What we ended up doing is incorporating that into our look. And so we basically created a look that was a little bit yellow, a little bit golden. I created a LUT with my colorist, Nick Hassan, over at Light Iron. We did this all remotely because he's in LA and I was in New York. And so we started with this base. And so when they start this trip, obviously, these are these two girls. They live in this little small town, mostly white America, and one is, like you said, South Asian, the other one is Latinx. They're kind of a little bit on the outskirts of their high school, and they feel very stuck, right? And so they decide to throw a party, and in the course of this party, Sunny, our South Asian character, ends up having sex, wakes up going, oh no, what am I gonna do? Let's go get the Plan B pill. They go to a pharmacy in North Dakota. The person says, no, morally, this does not, I don't agree with this. I can't give you the Plan B pill. So then they go on this adventure. So to show kind of that the feeling of being stuck, we desaturated the look a little bit. We desaturated the colors. And then as they get into the adventure, we bring up the saturation of colors. We use a lot more color and lighting. I mean, a lot of it is over the course of 2 days, so there's a lot of night work, so I'm incorporating a lot of different color. I love color. And then when we get to the end of the film, then we kind of feel a little bit even more saturation, more warmth. And so that's kind of the trajectory. We took it from a cool to warm to a desaturated to saturated is basically what we did.
That's pretty cool because these little subtle things that you're doing have a big emotional impact when you see them on the screen, right? So someone is actually feeling the colors and the saturation as the story changes.
Yeah.
So do you think that it was successful when you saw the edit and the final piece? Like, did it look like the way you wanted it to look?
It truly did. And I have to say, to give credit to the director, you know, this is a comedy. And all of you cinematographers know that whenever there's a comedy, a lot of times the director or the higher ups are going, it needs to be brighter, brighter. We need to see it. In order for it to be funny, we need to see it. And that was not Natalie. Natalie and she went in, she was like, it's a comedy, and yes, there's gonna be a lot of funny things, but I want it to feel real. I want it to feel dark. When they're outside in the parking lot, let's make it feel like they're outside in the parking lot, not make it feel like, you know, this high key kind of, she wanted it to feel real.
Okay.
And I feel that's actually even more tangible and even more funny. And I just credit her absolutely for sticking to that, because it is the one time I've been in a color session where she's like, go darker, go darker, on a comedy.
And you're like, whoa, this is awesome.
On a comedy, it was great. Yeah, I was so.
Okay, so comedy also comes with another convention, and is like the framing is different. You're not going for the tight close-up. Did you find yourself also keeping it looser? You know, are you seeing more of the physical stuff that actors are doing?
So we did a little bit, but we also use lenses in order to, we actually kind of changed. I mean, we broke a little bit of our rules. You know, we did have kind of rules in terms of all the worlds. Yeah. But we did start off a little bit on the longer lenses to kind of compress the space, to make them feel trapped. Right. And then once they get out into the world, we did actually go to wider lenses, and we're now talking large format. Right. You know, so like the 35s and the 24s. I mean, that's, we see the world. Right. And because we wanted the world to open up to them, and then also that's where a lot of the comedy happens. A lot of the comedy happens in that middle section.
Right here.
You know, but we also, there are very intimate moments that are also comedic, and the director wanted to create intimacy by using longer lenses. And, you know, she just truly believed in what the emotion was, as opposed to let's always stay wide. It was always more about what the emotion we're trying to tell in the scene, what are the beats in the scene. And then, you know, if that means a wide lens, great. But if that means a tighter lens, I think, you know, the funny is there too. The funny and the intimacy is there too. Wonderful.
And now let's talk about your camera lens choice for this particular project. We know that you use the Zeiss Supreme Primes for the shoot, and you use it with the Sony Venice. How is that combo? We were talking about it just earlier that you were a big fan of it. Why is
It's
that?
a brilliant combo.
Yeah.
It is my combo of choice, and I think a lot of cinematographers feel the same way. So actually, when we first started this film, we did talk about either shooting anamorphic or shooting large format. Because anamorphic, the focus fall off is really nice. Perspective magnification is more natural, and a lot of times, of course, anamorphic, you could see it's great for landscapes, but then it also, because the perspective and focus is so deep that it feels very intimate. And so we originally were looking at anamorphic, but the director, I was showing her lenses. She didn't actually like the fall off on the sides. She didn't actually, because a lot of at least the anamorphics, the lens breathing was just too much for her.
Yeah.
And so and I think it, and then so I proposed shooting with the Sony Venice and shooting large format.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think around when we started talking about this movie, large format, I mean, large format is all over the place now, and that's only like, what, 2 years, a year and a half? But at the time, large format lenses weren't that readily available, or at least even through the rental house that I was using. But I had happened to test the Zeiss Supremes at some point.
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with the combination. There wasn't a lot of large format lenses available to me. The Supremes were. I put them together, and when I did testing, it was absolute magic. And between the fact that the Zeiss Supremes open up to a 1.5, I can shoot the Sony Venice at 2500 ASA, so clean, so beautiful. I mean, we did a lot of those night exteriors with not a lot.
Yeah.
And it was great because, we were shooting in Syracuse, New York in November, October, and it's really cold at night. So we were able to move quickly, but still really create a really thick negative and a very clean image. And I mean, yeah, I could just go on, I guess.
I have a little graphic that I can show for those people that want to understand these format sizes a little bit better. Who's confused about the different format sizes in cinematography? Great, you're not alone. If you're not raising your hand, there are other people out there that are also confused. So let's just go over really quickly, and you guys can take a look at it while we're talking. So Sandra used this sensor right here, the Sony Venice, and in its largest format, 6K, 6x5, it is 36x24, which is the standard size for photography. And so she had to have a lens that at least had an image circle that covered that size, if not more. Supreme Primes and CP3s and Supreme Prime Radiance lenses from Zeiss all cover up to a 46.3 diagonal. So you can easily use that on the Sony Venice camera. And anything smaller, so any of the other sensors that are smaller, of course, you can use that lens combination. But specifically for the Sony Venice, was there a benefit also for light iron when it came to post-production? Like, what was this room that they had to kind of apply your LUT and create the look for it?
I mean, the one thing about the Sony Venice too, in terms of their color science coming out of the camera, it is actually pretty amazing in terms of color rendition, in terms, a lot of times, I don't know, with other cameras, there might be like a bit of a green bias that you have to pull out.
Yes.
And the Sony Venice, honestly, coming out just the Rec 709 is just so beautiful. And so it makes the pipeline very easy. Like what my colorist and I did for this movie, we've since done different things for other things, but I mean, we based it off the Sony Rec 709 look and then adjusted it to, to kind of go with those warm tones, those golden tones. But it is a very easy pipeline and a very easy workflow.
Nice. And then in terms of lighting, because you have 30 days, but even that's never enough, right? And you're doing outdoor stuff, nighttime stuff, and also set stuff too, right? So you're doing on set. What kind of lighting package do you have to have for this?
I mean, wow. So we are in Syracuse, New York, and they are some of the most hardest working people on the planet.
Yes.
But they're Syracuse, New York. it's not Los Angeles. It's not New York. I mean, they're getting better. So the crews, I mean, as far as the work ethic is great, but as far as the experience, it's not. And in terms of the equipment availability too, I mean, Syracuse is not the hotbed for, motion picture television. And so a lot of it is coming from Buffalo or New York City.
Right.
And, those aren't close. They're 2 hours away.
Yeah.
So our lighting package, if I can remember, it's been a little bit, but I mean, a lot of LED work. We did a lot of work with, of course, sky panels and Titan tubes and actually aperture.
Yeah.
We had a lot of little stuff that just little things.
Little
that my
things you pop in,
gaffer. Yeah, my gaffer is Desi Cole. She's amazing. She's here based in Los Angeles. If you're looking for an amazing chief lighting technician, Desi Cole. But,
Nice.
but we also had to move quickly. We had a very minimal crew. And so a lot of I guess it was all sky panels. And I think the biggest HMI, oh gosh, do we have no, 6K maybe, no.
That's not huge.
No condors, everything. I mean, we got maybe a scissor lift here or there. It was small, but we were able to still move very quickly.
That's wonderful. Really cool. I mean, that's the cool thing I think about LED technology is that ability to have a source that doesn't require a generator, in most cases.
Yeah.
And, gives you that punch that you need as well. Is there any compromises to using LED compared to tungsten or anything like that you find? Or does it change anything for your sensors?
I mean, I guess in terms of, I think this all comes in pre-production. I mean, I knew going in that this was going to be a full LED show just because there's a lot of color that I want to incorporate, and we just didn't have time or the money to get gels and all of that. So I already knew
you just press a few buttons and boom, it's blue.
and to be honest with you, in terms of what the Sony Venice can handle, I mean, there is still some issues with LEDs in terms of color. I mean, the in terms of some of the full spectrum color is absolutely, but like the yellows and the cyans don't necessarily replicate. And we did all those testing. We actually did this full on gel test and looked at gels versus color, knowing that we had to move quickly. And then if we wanted this color, if we truly wanted this color, then we had to do gels, but then we also had to take into consideration that was going to take time. But the Sony Venice really does, in terms of color rendition, really handle mixed color temperatures really well, like almost true.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's just, it's amazing.
Very cool.
And with the Zeiss lenses as well, like the combination is just key.
Very nice. I'm glad that you liked that and it worked out. I mean, you see it in the final image. It just really is a gorgeous look to it. Very nicely done. I think the talent is fantastic. They're just really light up the screen, and I think people should watch it. So for those of you that have Hulu, you have access to it.
Well, and I think the pandemic, I mean, again, I don't want to wish this pandemic on us ever again, but it really did help. I mean, one of the best things I love about filmmaking is that it's a family.
Yeah.
And we were, honestly, the pandemic made us a family because we couldn't leave the hotel. We couldn't go out to a bar or anything. So we just the actors like hung out with the crew. And I mean, one of the scenes that is in Plan B is this, they go into this rundown party house, and we shot that over the course of 5 hard nights, Syracuse, New York. It was like, I don't know. I mean, for me anyway, I'm a Florida girl, like in the teens, like lower digit, cold and muddy. There's actually a mud scene. And it was muddy and windy and rainy and when you work with the crew, and if you're not a family and if you don't love each other, I mean, that makes it even worse. And we did. We all wanted to kill each other after the end of that week, but then we came out going, oh my God, we just did this.
Right.
So the pandemic made us closer, I guess.
Wow, that's really
if you have to find a silver lining to everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're right. We wouldn't wish this upon anyone, but I'm glad that you were able to find something nice out of it. Let's talk about the politics of being on set. you know, things are changing quickly, of course, nowadays. We're seeing a lot of people come into the industry from all kinds of different backgrounds and stuff like that. What has your experience been, you know, progression wise from where you worked, you know, to now? And I know there's been a change, you know, you did commercials, you did doc style stuff, you've done a lot of different things actually. And then now, you know, you're doing a lot more narrative pretty consistently, television shows and feature films. How has your career path been, you know, like, what, how would you describe like where you've come from, let's say 7 years ago to now?
Um, so, wow, what's interesting is, I did start out as a camera assistant, and I did that for about 8 years. And, when I started out, there was still this kind of hierarchy of things. Like if you want to be a cinematographer, you either go the camera route or you go the lighting route. And, you kind of work yourself, work your way up. And so I started in camera. And then I looked at myself and I was just like, oh my God, at this point, I'm going to be like 60 before I even shoot, And so but now, so that's all changing. I decided I'm going to go to the American Film Institute and basically jumpstart my career there. And the industry has changed in terms of just narrative. Like I'm trying to, it's a big question, Snehal. But
I only got the hard ones for you.
But one thing that my whole focus when I came out of school was to do either documentary or narrative filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And actually I'm still not there yet, guys, but shooting like studio feature is where I would love to go.
Sure.
But now like television has, with the streamers and everything, has just exploded. Oh, yeah. And what we're finding is before it was like, oh, you're the DP that does television. Yeah. Oh, you'll never do features.
That is not the case.
And now it's not the case anymore. Yeah. There is the ability to blend the two. You don't necessarily have to get kind of pigeonholed in the world of television and vice versa. At least that's from my experience anyway.
Now let's jump into, since you mentioned it, what is it like? Is there a big difference in filming, let's say an independent, but decent budget feature like Plan B versus doing a television show like the L Word, Generation Q? Or are you doing the same type of thing just for serving a different story?
So I think as far as practically, logistically, it's a little bit of the same. The same. We had a lot more resources on the L Word, but the time frame is still the same.
Right.
On an indie film, you still have to work quickly. Mm-hmm. And then on a television show, you still have to work quickly. On Plan B, yes, I could have done with a few more things, but we made it happen. And of course, on something like the L Word, you have a little bit more equipment. The difference really, though, is the fact that, at least from my perspective, creating kind of a visual trajectory. It depends on the show, but let's use the L Word as an example. The L Word is an ensemble piece, and it's hard to create kind of a visual trajectory for 20 plus characters. Yes. But when you do a feature, which is 2 hours, you can really kind of plan out visually, and you only have one director. So you can kind of keep that consistency going. Of course, on a television show, there's other politics you have to deal with. So not only are you keeping the consistency of the look, but you are the constant. So you have new directors coming in, right, who also have very good ideas, who've studied the show, but they may want to try something else. They may do things a little differently. So you have to come in and say, great, or no, we don't do that here. And it's a tough, and while also shooting and doing all of that. So yeah, the politics are definitely different, yes, I think, when doing, at least from my perspective, yeah, doing television. And maybe the creative process is a little bit different. But as far as the working practices is kind of the same. So
that's a good That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And to further elaborate for the L word, you work with different directors. Did you switch off cinematographers as well?
Mhm.
So you have that as well, right? You're trading off with someone that's like a partner that you actually don't work with directly, right?
So my partner on the L word, Generation Q, her name is Moira Morel, and she's brilliant. And what's so interesting is her and I are very different people in terms of how we approach things, but we come up with the same result. And I mean, and I can't really tell you what that is. You'd have to talk to my gaffer. I think my gaffer or my camera operators can give you a better insight in that. But I mean, but that I think is a good, just kind of a good way of working. We have the same goal in mind, and however we get there, it doesn't matter as long as the goal is the same.
That's the main important thing. At the end of the day, also with the L word, you would have the resources in post-production also to make sure that you had the consistency in the look, right? Someone's paying attention to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and then we have the consistent gaffer who is, the consistent chief lighting technician, the consistent camera operators, who are all making sure that we aren't straying too far away from what the look of the show is.
Everyone's like, no, you must do it this way.
But really what's interesting between the L word, because I did season 1 and season 2, and we actually made significant changes between season 1 and season 2.
Oh, in terms of the look and...
In terms of the look, the showrunner wanted this to feel more visceral, more intimate. Again, it's an ensemble piece, and season 1 was a little bit too objective for her, which I totally agree, and I had that all... Actually, Moira and I had every intention of changing it if she didn't say so.
Right. So you made it more POV style?
Well, actually, we went entirely handheld.
Oh, okay.
For the most part, there's some Technocrane, some Steadicam.
Yeah.
And we switched to large format because again, I feel that's more intimate, but then also we can actually see the world. The perspective is more natural. And then we also changed lenses as well. We went from we stuck to Zeiss. We were Zeiss Super Speeds,
right,
and the Alexa Mini in season 1, and then in season 2 we went Sony Venice to Zeiss Supremes.
Wow. Yeah, that is a change. I mean, super speeds are like 40, 50 years old usually. So you're definitely going to something more modern. Very cool. Interesting. What I want to do right now is I want to open it up for Q&A for Sandra. So if you have any questions, please come up. There are 2 microphones on 2 sides of the room. You could just come up to a microphone and line up, and we'll start asking her some questions and grill her about her work. So is there anyone that wants to ask any questions? No?
None.
Oh, please, then get up there.
Why super speeds? Why did you get rid of super speeds and then go to a newer one?
Well, let's see.
Line up over here. Yeah.
We originally loved the kind of the vintage type look of the super speeds. We also, love the fact that they are super speeds, that they open up to 1.4s, and we were going to push and shoot wide open for that focus fall off. And so that combination was basically why we chose the Zeiss Super Speeds. And then why we changed, well, to be honest, I'll be totally honest with you, we changed because we switched to large format. So that was the big deal, the thing. And then the other part of it, because they are older style lenses, it actually made it very hard because they weren't actually the ones we were using. I can't even remember if they were even rehoused or anything. They were really hard for the focus pullers because on the Zeiss Super Speeds, if any of you know, the focus marks, they're kind of all over the place. And so shooting with the Zeiss Supremes, still giving us that speed, but then also in terms of the consistency, in terms of the mechanics of the lens, also the best part of it is the lens data. I'm able to actually see on the monitor what stop I'm shooting at, what distance I'm shooting at. And I am actually, because we are moving quite quickly, I have iris control at my station. And so being able to see where I'm at, if I have to
Without having
do
to
a
look
little
anywhere.
iris pulls,
Yeah.
was really great. So so I think it was a combination of a look thing, but a lot of it was a practical mechanical thing.
That's so important when you're shooting, a television show. You're shooting for weeks upon weeks, and it has to be hardy and repeatable, and definitely having a modern optic, like you said, with the modern housing. Definitely there's a benefit to that.
Yeah, we got some, of course, it was when we did the first season. Overall, they were very happy. I mean, we of course, Moira and I both, we were like, oh God, we got to make so many changes because, there's so many things we could do differently. But one of the things that the showrunner sat down with us and they were like, because our focus pullers were absolutely superb.
Yeah.
But there was some focus issues.
Sure.
And I think a lot of it had to do with just the mechanics of the lens.
That's very true. And of course, the Supremes have a really nice look. I think that you're able to exploit really nicely. And
Opening up at 1.5 is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I know people talk about the sweet spot of the lens being at a 2.8, but I just in terms of the focus fall off at 1.5, it's fantastic.
Very nice. Very cool. Please.
Okay. First, I want to say thank you so much for this presentation. You're a woman cinematographer. And what I want to say is that it's going to be my first time doing a movie, the first time. And I listened to everything you said. You sound like you're a fantastic cinematographer. From the standpoint of looking for a camera person, a good person, a good cinematographer for a first film that I'm doing, what do you think I should look for? I want a woman. I don't know why I say a woman versus men. It could be anyone that's fantastic. But tell me what to look for in looking for a good cinematographer to come out with things that you're saying there on your presentation right there. What do I look for?
Wow. I do have to say, I mean, you obviously want to look for a good collaborator but then also somebody who understands what you're trying to achieve and maybe, or finding somebody that can help you if you're, trying to figure out how to do something. I honestly feel too that you should try to find somebody that you just would love to hang out with. Because a lot of times, you end up spending, not only will you spend time on the set, but you will spend time shot listing and just, or talking about looks and references, but you might do it over coffee or pizza or something, and the more that you can kind of get in sync just as a friend, like somebody you want to hang out with, I think that too, because if you don't want to hang out with this person other than on the set, then that's not the right person either. Because like I said, being on a film set is like a family. I mean, I spend more time with my film family than I do my own family when I'm working. And so I want to be, the people that I hire, I want them to be damn good at what they do, but I also want them to be like people I want to spend 12, well, hopefully soon we're not going to be doing those 14, 16, 17 hour days. Let's just say, yeah, IA solidarity. But you want to work with people that you can just spend all of those hours with.
Okay.
That will listen to, and a good listener. That's the other thing. You need a good listener.
And I just want to add
was
that
a script supervisor. I am a script supervisor. And I have looked on the point of, a film, of looking what the camera shots are. But basically, I don't know. I know the camera shots and everything else, but I don't know them the way you do. So I need a good person like you. I think you're a great inspiration to us women as we're the first time going out and trying to do a film. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I want to tell any sort of director, I don't necessarily think you have to go into the cinematographer and say, cinematographer, I want a 24 millimeter lens, like at this height. don't worry
Dodge it a
about,
little bit.
right. Don't worry about that. Like, I mean, obviously if you are absolutely a tech head and you love to talk about lenses, absolutely. But us cinematographers, we want you to tell us just what you're feeling, like what you're seeing, or if you want to be like, I want to be something like this, or look at this photograph, or I don't know, sometimes I even work off of music. And then what happens is that you can create a visual language together. And then eventually, as a first-time filmmaker, you start understanding like, oh, that's a 24 millimeter lens. Oh, I understand. But I think it's more important to really know what you want emotionally and potentially even visually than trying to figure out technically, you know, because I know a lot of people are sometimes afraid to talk to cinematographers because they think cinematographers are gonna like expect them to talk in these like technical terms. And that's not, I mean, at least not for me anyway. I would rather you tell me how you feel and then we will figure out the technical from there.
Okay, I'm gonna look at your work that you did on Hulu. I don't have Hulu at home, but I will
So
check those out.
to talk to this point,
Okay.
for those of you who are looking for collaborators, we live in a day and age where you can look up anyone's work online. Even Sandra has a beautiful website with a lot of samples. So I want everyone to do that. You know, that's some homework for your filmmakers. Go look up some work and see if you like something. If you like something, reach out to that person. You know, that's the first step to take.
Okay, thanks.
Sir, your question. Thank you for the question.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to your experience working on the L Word in terms of balancing both showrunners and directors and another DP, like sharing all of that massive opinions and working together to create something.
It's tough. The one thing I have to say, in season one, I'll be absolutely upfront and honest with you. I think we were still trying to find our footing. It was an interesting thing because it is a legacy show. Like there was the original L Word and there's this huge fan base. And I think we were all struggling to find truly what the look of the season was. And so it's hard when us as cinematographers are trying to find that look along with the showrunner, and then all of these new directors come in. But what we ended up doing was taking the best of everybody after the end of the season, and then kind of looking back and applying it to the new season. So when we went into season 2, the showrunner and the DP and myself, we set extremely strict rules for ourselves. We, again, handheld most of the time. We did walk and talks, mostly handheld, but depending on the emotional resonance, it would be Steadicam. We would, in order to world build and be bigger and more expansive, we would use techno cranes, but everything was handheld. We would not shoot, because we are shooting large format, would not shoot anything wider than a 50 millimeter lens. A lot of foreground and perspective. And so having those specific rules, whenever we change directors, I could communicate better to the directors and say, no. Because I remember even when one episode, the director wanted to, we were shooting this wonderful building. And a lot of times on technos, we would go to a 35 millimeter lens, but she really wanted a 24. But then the techno would like come in and end up in an over. We never do these tight, intimate conversations at a 24.
Yeah.
And I did it, and my operator was like, Sandra, this is not our show. And I'm like, I know it's not our show, but I think we should just do it because I believe that we do need that 24 to see the space, and hopefully they don't use the over. And they didn't use it. But there is some times where you can say what you want to say, but you're just going to sometimes have to let the director do it. And then, well, hopefully, there's other ways that they could cut the scene and not use that over. But But that's pretty much the relationship that I had on the L Word. And of course, every show is different and every cinematographer is different. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience. I am really curious to hear about some of the camera testing you did. You spoke about really enjoying the Sony Venice, what it brought in terms of rendition of colors and other aspects of the image. Curious, what other cameras did you test for Plan B, and what do you feel is the edge that the Sony Venice gives you? Maybe you can go into a little bit more of your subjective feeling about it.
I might have to come back to you on your last question, but you asked me did I test any other cameras for Plan B?
Yeah, and also how you came to decide, or how you've come to appreciate the Sony Venice so much.
So, in all reality, actually, the choice of the Sony Venice and the Zeiss Supremes were actually because budget-wise, that's what we could afford. And what was available. And so I just went in testing the combination. So I remember some of the tests we did at the rental house, because I knew there was a lot of daylight, we did interior daylight work. We did overhead fluorescent work because I wanted to see kind of what the color, how it handled all of those different kind of mixed lighting situations. I did look at some flaring. The Zeiss Supremes, they don't have fancy flares. They're nice flares, but if you want to get those kind of like crazy dramatic flares, that's where you go to the radiance. And what else did I do? I also did because I thought as I was doing all of these tests, I love the combination. I did actually more lighting tests. I did more gels. I looked at one of the things with the Sony Venice that I wanted to do. If you watch Plan B, a lot of it happens in a car. It's a road trip at night in the Dakotas where there are no city lights. It's all black. Where is the light coming from? Is it coming from the dashboard? Where is this ambient? And so we tested a lot of low light situations and how far we could push it. And that's when I discovered like the 2500 ASA along with, shooting 1.5 on the Zeiss Supremes. I mean, that gave us such a beautiful, clean image and also a thick negative. One of the things that I come from a film background. And so even on the digital side, I will always shoot with a thick negative and then either via a LUT or a look, bring it down. And so that I know that I have room to work. There are cinematographers that push it to the edge. And I try to do that a little bit, but I also try to give myself some, working room.
So rather than really underexpose for the end look, if you're wanting a lot of richness in the shadows or a lot of depth and darkness, you would more normally expose and then bring that down with the LUT or bring.
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
would do it via the look. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you had another question?
Well, I was kind of curious about what, if any, leaning you have towards the Sony Venice versus, say, an Arri Alexa LF or Red Monster or other large format cinema cameras.
So I am definitely leaning the Sony Venice because of that 2500 ASA.
I'm trying to recall, is that one dual native ISO? Is that what it's?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So we have
that's
dual ISO, so at 500 ASA or 2500, and they both are extremely clean. Also, like I said, it does really, in terms of color, in terms of skin tone, it is really good with skin tone, and it is really good with color. And a lot of times I found myself when I first started, I was actually afraid to work in that 2500 range. And I don't know, I didn't take long to not be afraid anymore. And I just ND down. We would just ND down.
It does have internal ND. Did you use internal?
And it all has internal NDs. That's the other great part of it.
Right.
You can quickly just change.
Yeah, the button. Push the button.
Push the button, and it's like every flavor, 3,
Yeah.
6, 9.
12,
You're not like skipping.
Yeah, and so Sony Venice has a dual ISO. The Alexa would be rated, most people rate it 800,
800.
and Monstro 640 to 800. around there.
Thank you so much.
For sure.
All right, hello. You've probably been asked this question several times, but I was just wondering if you were only given one focal length or field of view, which one would you choose for a project? And also adding to that, if you ever worked on a project where you shot the whole thing, whether it's a feature or just an episode, and you only utilize one focal length for the entirety of the project. Also, I'd like to know what that feeling is like, and why would you make that decision? And so.
Do you like shooting with only one focal length?
Actually, I can't say. I have not been on a project where that has been part of the visual language, because I feel like that's the beauty of the lenses, as part of the tool and the toolbox of the cinematographer, is that you use focal lengths in order to visually tell whatever story you're trying to tell. So I haven't actually done a project where we have found that the one focal length is gonna, do the trick. But my favorite focal length, and I honestly, if you ask me why, I'm not sure, but in both large format and in Super 35 is the 65 millimeter lens.
Oh.
And it's actually a lot of people's, because whenever I try to get 65 millimeter lenses, it's always really hard because they're not available. There is something, it feels, the perspective is right. It feels intimate. It doesn't, there is something about that 65 millimeter lens, and maybe there's somebody else in the audience who could be a little bit more articulate about it, but feeling wise, I can't even give you a technical answer. I have no idea.
Hey, that's okay. So everyone should be reminded that cinematographers are a mix of technical artistry. Sometimes they just they know what they like, and that's okay. You don't have to have a technical explanation for it. It's not required.
I am that cinematographer.
That is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Everyone's a mix of the two. Sir, what was your question?
Hi, I was curious.
Thank you.
Either of you to try to give me a sense of maybe the technicality of the lens itself. I don't know if you faced already a situation of shooting with virtual scenery, but you did tell me that you run a lot of different tests and how the lens was able to stay mostly true to the colors, the different colors together and the negative. So I was curious to know if you would have any preference in that kind of scenario, that shooting virtual sceneries, or what would be the limitation for this particular lens, or maybe what would be the advantage that this lens would bring to that
Well,
kind
I
of.
can just answer for the technical. Our lenses have the XD metadata technology, so we have a lot of actually positives for virtual production. Not only do you get the information that Sandra mentioned, which is the focus and iris position, but you also get something called shading and distortion. So shading is your drop off and exposure from center to edge, which depends on what your iris setting is at that moment. And then distortion, a lot of times depends, especially on wider lenses, on what focusing distance you're at. As you change your focusing distance, your distortion changes. We give you that information in real time, and we actually have methods to use that in a virtual production environment with existing technology. So we're getting better and better at doing that. So there's a tactical benefit of going with a system that really communicates all that information. Soon, if everything works out, we'll be able to use our Zeiss XD lenses, CP3s and Supremes and Radiants in a virtual production environment without having to calibrate. That's our goal. So you don't have to even calibrate the system. It'll work plug and play and automatically with whatever sensor size you're using, and work in Unreal Engine, Unity, and other systems as well. That's the technical stuff. Now, the esoteric, we'll turn to Sandra.
Well, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in virtual production, to be honest with you. I mean, I guess on maybe the equivalent side is I do have experience with LED walls, and actually all of Plan B, all of the
driving stuff.
the driving stuff, a lot of the driving day work is all LED wall. because we couldn't, it's a whole road trip. How do we do it? And one of the things that I learned from more of it's technical, but then also aesthetic, is that shooting large format, because focus fall off, the focus fall off is much more graceful. You have less depth of field. It really does help with some of the LED walls in terms of the moiraying, in terms of any sort of the artifacting that you may see with your eyes, but not necessarily on camera. And so I mean, I can't say I have not actually done any LED wall in Super 35 with that sensor size. Everything I have done is actually the large format sensor size. But I feel like the believability of it, it does really pay off with that kind of combination. But that's all I can speak to. I want to learn more about virtual production. So, if anybody's doing,
any
can I come and
experts in
visit?
here? Thank you.
Yeah.
This will be our last question for the Q&A.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Speaking of the LED wall, the driving part that you just talked about. So I have like a 2-3 quick questions. So does that mean they were actually done in a studio or something like that?
Yes.
All right, cool. So that means the car wasn't really moving.
No,
Okay.
we had a full, we actually had, was it 3 walls plus, I wish I had a photo. It's a great setup. And then we had something above to basically to give the look of the, on the windshield, the reflections. And then we also had moving panels as well to add to the reflections, and then also the light. We actually, in all of the work that we did in Plan B for all the day work, I think a lot of the lighting all came from the LED wall. My gaffer may have had some sort of LED light to give it a sense of kind of sun coming through. But I feel like we had it and we never used it.
Oh,
So.
cool. Yeah. And the next thing is, you said something about the shooting in the film, you shoot the double negative. What does that mean? Thicker negative.
Thicker negative.
Yeah. What does that mean?
So basically you want to be able to have enough room to work so that when you go into post-production, if you have to kind of, bring up a face or bring down an area, there's enough room to do that. Because if you end up underexposing, let's say there's something in a corner, right? And in the corner was a doll. And let's say you didn't put any light there, it was all black. In terms of where your negative lies, it's way down in the shadows. And then all of a sudden the director's like, oh my gosh, I need to see that doll in the corner.
Now you don't have that there.
And then, so you go into post-production and they try to lift it and it's not there and it gets all noisy. And then all of a sudden your image, unless you want to have a noisy image, I don't know, but if you wanted a clean image, then you don't have anything there. So I always like to, and I'll be honest, I'll tell you too, this is in television, no matter what show you're on, they all want to see the faces.
Yeah.
They want to see faces. And I have not been on a TV show where they don't bring up the faces. We light it and then they bring up the face. So we want to be able to give them a little bit of room to work because we don't want the faces to then go grainy or texture or like the color goes off and they get gray. We want to be able to have that room to work.
I think that led into my last question is because I read one cinematographer's interview. He said, okay, we light for the highlights, we print for the shadows, which is actually film language. So what I understood from that is he exposes for the highlights. So the shadows will be underexposed and then you lift them up later in the post. Is that right? Is that what you would do if you have a high contrast?
I don't know. I have to see if I can. I guess every scenario is a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say because I don't necessarily light for the highlights too.
No.
Like it just depends. Again, like if I want to let the highlights go, I don't necessarily want to let it go so that I can't bring it back,
Yeah.
or if I want to take the edge off of it. But I'm not necessarily lighting for the highlights. I want to light for the midtones. But
Midtones.
again,
Okay.
it all depends on
Mhm.
what the scenario is. I mean, and that's just how I work as a cinematographer. I can tell you right now, you'll probably get another cinematographer that will tell you never to give working room so that in post they can't change anything. I mean, so it just depends. It honestly depends. And I feel like that's why I love these things, because I love to learn how other cinematographers work, because every story is different.
Yeah.
And maybe that story will require that technique, or maybe this story will require that technique. But we need to be able to have that big toolbox so we know what to do. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that was wonderful. Let's give her a hand.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all for all the wonderful questions. Zeiss does have a booth in the middle of the hall. You can come visit us. We do have the Venice with the Supreme Primes
Check it
combo
out.
if you want to check it out for yourself. We also have a red Monstro there, also a Blackmagic Pocket 6K camera, a ton of lenses to look at, and we'd love to have you there. Thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow, 2:30 with Checo Varesi, and we're gonna be talking about his new Hulu miniseries called Dope Sick, and Michael Keaton actually stars in that. And that's really exciting about the Oxycontin fiasco caused by greedy people. So that should be really interesting. If you guys want to come check that out. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
I used to rule the world, seas of rise when I gave the word. Now in
at these kind of presentations is explain what Movie Maker Production Services is, and then we take questions and talk about how the service could work for your project. So we'll tell you a little bit, we'll do a little intro, and then let's do it that way, because I think that's the most useful way to use our time, is to be able to talk about how we can tailor the project, tailor the program to your project. So Movie Maker magazine was founded in 1993 in Seattle, and I moved it to Los Angeles a few years later. And I had just gotten out of film school in the early 90s and wanted to make feature films. And of course, you know, I was no different than anyone else, didn't have enough money to make a feature film. And back in those days, it was even more expensive, a lot more expensive to make a film, because you had to use film.